Blog Talk Radio.
Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And in the presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I see aspiring to be free. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Within and without, above and below, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. Without and within, below and above, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I find in tune with the divine. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. For to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shabbat Shalom, Holy Angel of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence.
Thank you for joining me here tonight on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I'm your hostess this evening. You were just listening to a song called I Sense Your Presence. It's by Shimshai. And if you'd like to check out more of their music, by the way, you can do so at shimshai.com. I believe that's at the bottom of our show description there. And I just want to extend a welcome to everybody, whether you're joining us for the first time or whether you're returning, and certainly all those people out there on our other networks who are streaming us live. We have Penn or Para Encounters Network, Streamfinder, TalkStream Live, and then, of course, we have podcasts that will be going into iTunes and TuneIn. So we're definitely growing here at Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and some of those places actually you can find, with the podcast, you can find all of the Main Street Universe shows, by the way. And here at Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, what I do is look at different ways that compassion exists in our lives, how to remove our blocks, resistances, frustrations, and more. And some weeks I'm discussing different aspects of compassion, how it affects our life, and the different areas of compassion. And then every now and then we throw some exercises in. I've done that from time to time, like at the end of last year when I did a review show for 2013. And then most of the time I've got guests on the show, absolutely fantastic ones like I've got on tonight. Susan Gale is with us tonight, and we'll be bringing her on in a little bit here. And then every now and then I also have some musical artists. Last year I was able to feature Stephen Halpern and Peter Cater, and this year I'm working on a couple of others as well, so you'll have to wait and see what I come up with for our musical guests this year. And what I do in my own work is focus on helping people find and use compassion in their everyday lives. I've created the Genesis Clearing Statement, which some of you have experienced on previous shows. And matter of fact, Kevin Baird, another one of our hosts here, did a great interview on me where we worked with the Genesis Clearing Statement. And that was back in the fall of 2012, so you can look that up in our archives. And I've also authored 4 books, the 2 most recent being You, Me, Life, Dreams and its companion workbook, and the first 2 being Activating Compassion and its companion workbook. In addition, I've created the Compassion Tour, which is a multi-state, and it's a nationwide tour that has workshops and retreats and seminars and book signings and fundraising events and all kinds of cool little things. And I actually just finished doing a little bit of a fundraising event at the end of the 2013 there for Live and Let Live Farm Rescue. And I'm already working on creating some things for 2014, so you're going to want to follow those events at jessieannnicholsgeorge.eventbrite.com. So just a reminder, if you enjoy the show this evening, make sure that you tell your friends, family, share it with those people out there in your social media, because you never know who is looking for exactly this very topic, and you never know whose life you're going to be able to help out when you share a link to a show. And they can get in right by the same link that you used to get into the show, by the way, again, as well as finding us on iTunes and TuneIn as podcast. And then also I am doing YouTube versions as well of my shows. So lots and lots of options for viewing the show. Now, before we get started, as those of you that have listened in before know, I like to delve into a little book called The 72 Names of God, Technology for the Soul, and that's by Yehuda Berg. Yehuda is a great Kabbalah master and has put his work and his insights and teachings into this book. And what I love about his work so much is that it's put into everyday language. So he takes these big concepts, puts them into everyday language, and and then he comes up with these amazing messages. So let's take a look and see what his message is for us tonight. And what we've got here tonight is water. And I think this is actually good, considering our topic tonight is dealing with spiritual gifts and intuition, and water is certainly the element of those things. And what he's got to say here, and water is the common word for this name of God, the worst polluted body of water on the planet is not some highly contaminated lake. It is the human body, which consists of over 65% water. And the insight that he gives on this is, according to science, water is the most mysterious and least understood substance in the universe. According to Kabbalah, water is the light of God made manifest in the physical world. Hence, water pollution is both a physical and spiritual crisis. When the water in our lakes and the water in our cells are tainted with physical and spiritual toxins, our personal and global immune systems are dangerously weakened. Genuinely pure water has the power to cleanse both physically and spiritually. In the same way that water miraculously dissolves dirt, grime, and filth from the physical body, water's metaphysical essence dissolves away the spiritual uncleanliness and negativity that we've brought upon our body and soul. The Kabbalists say water can naturally heal, water can rejuvenate, and water holds the secret to immortality. But centuries of war, persecution, and hatred took its toll. Thus, water lost its intrinsic power. This name helps to return all water to its original divine and pristine state. And the meditation that he gives with this is, you purify the waters of the earth and awaken the forces of healing and immortality. And the way this name is pronounced is Vav Mem Bet. That's Vav Mem Bet, and that's the name commonly known as water. And I will actually have that information up if you'd like to check it out during the week. I put this information up on my page of the Main Street Universe tab on my website at JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com, and you'll be able to locate it there and check that out. I leave it up every week, and it's usually up right after the show, so I usually get it up within an hour or so. Now, a little thought here before we go into bringing our guest on tonight and before we go to our break, a little something to think about in regards to our topic tonight. Have you had experiences with children that have intuitive or other spiritual gifts? Is this becoming more and more commonplace in our society? Do children need help with working with their gifts? Now, there can be a lot of different thoughts as we explore this. We do know with indigo children, crystal children, and the upcoming rainbow children, that gifts are part of their existence and yet can also lead to great amounts of confusion and misunderstandings with them. For some, leading them to become more isolated, crave higher social approval, or to avoid communications verbally with others. The thought of when to start working with those that are spiritually gifted varies a great deal. Some feel that this is something that should be chosen by the individual later in life. Others feel that as soon as it is known, or even before total consciousness of the gifts have set in, that they should be worked with. It seems to me that some of this comes from wondering, is it best for it to be totally chosen by the individual versus starting early, allowing them to learn responsibly and develop things wisely, versus children are too reactive to use wisely versus they need to understand what is happening, why, and how to work with it. All of these being quite valid points and concerns, I often think it all depends on the individual's circumstances, person, etc. Susan Gale has chosen to use her extensive background to create a private school for helping children work with their spiritual gifts. While her school is all about psychic stuff, she also places a very strong emphasis on the following things: acceptance of self, sanctuary, self-confidence, understanding and knowledge, trust in self and others. I find this to be an important thing as it helps us to learn responsibly and wisely. Too many kids get into different things and then get themselves into lots of trouble because no one has taught them these very aspects. As with most people, building and having these attributes leads us to act in a more responsible way. In addition, I feel that it is important to note that many of the techniques that we would use with youth also work very well with adults. The foundations are the same. I sometimes wonder how amazing it would have been to have a school like this to go to and study in, a place of refuge and sanctuary. Although I have a long heritage of this work, at least 13 generations, I still taught myself and had to find teachers to work with. While perhaps wiser than most when it came to being responsible, it would have been great to have more guidance and the knowledge when I was younger. I wonder how things would have been different if I was encouraged to actively work with and embrace my gifts at a much younger age. What are your thoughts on how psychic and spiritual gifts should be developed? Have you had experiences with psychic children? How does what we need to teach kids with these gifts also apply to adults? Now, this week our guest focuses on a component of compassion that is related to the aspect in my books known as waking up. And this reminds us that it is important to be aware of what is within us and around us on multiple levels, as it will awaken the compassion within you. I'm going to take a short break, and when we return, I will have Susan Gale with us, and she's going to be sharing her work in helping people learn about and develop their intuitive gifts. And the song I've got for you during our break tonight is 10 Commandments. It's by Claire Hedin, and I believe her information is also at the bottom of our show description, but for those of you that aren't able to see that, you can find out more about Claire's work at www.clairehedin.com. That's CLAREHEDIN.com. We'll be back in a few minutes.
A thing you have made, you shall not covet anything that they have. Rest content with who you are. Live of my name to appease your own vanity. Covenant you have made up and day. You shall rest one anything that belongs to another from slavery. Do not covet anything they have. Honor your father, your mother, that you may live long and enjoy the land that I have given you. Rest content with who you are. Your neighbor, you shall not idolize a thing you have made. You shall not covet anything that they have. Rest content with who you are. Live of my name to appease your own vanity. Covenant you have made up and day. You shall rest one anything that belongs to another from slavery. Do not covet anything they have. Honor your father, your mother, that you may live long and enjoy the land that I have given you. Rest content with who you are. Your neighbor, you shall not idolize a thing you have made. You shall not covet anything that they have. Rest content with who you are. Live of my name to appease your own vanity. Covenant you have made up and day. You shall rest one anything that belongs You shall rest one day.
And welcome back. You are listening to Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I'm your hostess this evening. You were just listening to a song called 10 Commandments. It's by Claire Hedin. And again, if you'd like to check out more of her work, you can do so at www.clairehedin.com. That's CLAREHEDIN. And again, I'd like to take a moment to welcome all of those that are streaming live through our other networks, Para Encounters Network, StreamFinder, and TalkStream Live. We're really glad to have you with us. Now, I'd like to bring on my guest tonight, Susan Gale, and she is the co-founder of A Place of Light. She has been working with children since the age of 19 in a variety of settings, including early childhood, school-age child care, camps, a public and private school in rural and inner-city settings. Susan has also owned a sole proprietorship school, the philosophy of which was based on the Edgar Cayce readings, and we look at her work with helping people, particularly children, use their intuitive gifts and how they are developed. And you can learn more about her work, by the way, at www.aplaceoflight.net, and that link is also available at the bottom of the show description there tonight. So, Gale, it is Susan. I'm sorry, I had your last name right in front of me. Susan, it's wonderful to have you here on Activating Compassion.
Well, it's an honor. It's an honor to be here. But I did want to say there's no A. It's just placeoflight.net.
Okay. Place of Light.
On the website. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's what I've got down here. You know what? It's right before the Mercury retrograde. It's pre-Mercury retrograde, and it is messing with my communication. So, but
no, because the aplaceoflight.net is a suicide support group, and so maybe some people needed to hear that tonight.
Maybe somebody did need to hear that. You know, it always comes out for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
Susan, I would love to have you start by, filling us in. I kind of gave a quick overview, but fill us in a little bit more about, who you are and what brought you into doing this work that you're doing now.
Look, the work that I'm doing now, which is trying to see people through a different lens than what society sees people, was inspired by a little boy that was in my early childhood program who had been diagnosed as being autistic. And I didn't think he was autistic. He clearly knew what he was doing. He understood what everybody else was doing. He could see right through you, and he was very aware and present. He just didn't talk. And it took me quite a while, but I realized that the child was telepathic. And my younger son is telepathic at will, so I had him come in and speak with the child and convince him that he needed to be bilingual. Otherwise, he would be forever going to these therapy sessions and having people talk about him. And the child said, but it's so slow and clumsy. And my son just asked him in this very practical way, do you want to keep going to all these sessions and have all these people talking to you and talking about you? And he said, no. And this was all done telepathically, this whole conversation. And so 30 days later, this child had a speaking vocabulary of 30 words. And I thought, now, that took 5 minutes to get that sorted out and help this child understand why it's important to talk out loud. How many people are we missing of being able to be helped by not looking at people through those eyes? And so basically what we do is to try to reach people by helping them understand what they can do and how it fits into this physical world in a safe and productive way.
And I think that is, I think that's a great thing to make those realizations. And I love that you bring up that example, because I think of how many times have we misunderstood or misdiagnosed a child along the way, and then, tried to feed them these drugs and try to put them in all of these things that they don't necessarily need. And I mean, to come to that realization is a huge shift to make, and to make that thing. And that's certainly an inspiring way to move into the work that you're doing and what's happening where you are.
This particular child was only 3 years old.
Wow.
But telepathically, he could have a very coherent conversation. His body wasn't able to, but his spirit was. And that's another thing that missed. I know at the beginning you were talking about when to start with gifts, but when the child is born, that's when the child is closest to its spirit self, because it's just left that world. And it's because of the lack of development of the physical body that they cannot tell us the things that they know and that they see. But they know everything that's going on. They don't have wisdom to understand it, but they know and understand everything that's going on around them from the time they're born. They just can't express it out loud. And I remember when my son was first born, the first thing he did was look around the room, and then he looked at me and he said, "Well, where are all those trees we've been talking about?" I said, "Oh, boy." I said, "We'll get out of here soon. You'll see." And we just had this whole conversation about, we were inside a hospital, and we'll get to go out soon. And when we did go out, he said, "Oh, there they are. All right." So he was pleased, because that was something he had been looking forward to, is seeing all of that with physical eyes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something, because I think if I remember correct, in your books, you mentioned about having that communication before even a child is born into the world.
Yes. The spirit is whole, and the spirit is always present, and it's not lacking. We tend to confuse things because we look at a physical body and assume that's what we are, but that's kind of like our car that we're driving for this ride of a lifetime, and when the car wears out, just like you get out of your car, after you take your trip, we leave our car and go on about our business in a spirit way. And so the body helps us learn things that we need to learn, because it's painful to be in the body sometimes. It's physical pain, it's emotional pain, and those things we don't experience in spirit, so it's harder to learn when we're just in spirit. But it's important to understand that the body is not who and what we are. It's not that we develop our spiritual gifts. It's that we develop our human side so that it can live in harmony with who we are in spirit. That's the way I see it, anyway.
Well, I think that that's a great way to put things and to see things, because, as you say, the spirit is already whole, trying to adapt how to function under all the restrictions, so to say, that it has coming through this human body. And there's certainly things here on this planet and this earth that we have to deal with as human beings that we don't have to deal with as spiritual beings, per se. And that's a huge thing. And, you provided an interesting example with the 3-year-old there, and having this come up as a 3-year-old. When I was in my blog for the week, and I was getting some different responses come back, and somebody had shared a wonderful story with me that I found very interesting, where there was a 2-year-old boy that was in this family, and that child bringing a new baby in, and the 2-year-old wanted to be left alone with the baby. They kept thinking no, and they kept putting it off and not wanting to honor that request. And they, and the child just more and more adamant that I want to be left alone with this baby. And so eventually, I guess one day they did. They left this child alone, and they just stepped into the next room where they could watch everything that was happening. And the 2-year-old sat down and was saying, tell me, you're something to the effect of basically, you're still connected with God. Tell me what that's like, because I'm forgetting. So it's interesting to hear you say, here at the age of 3 and things, we're already losing that connection consciously, whereas we have it up to just that young age in there.
Yeah, and that's what the book Soulful Parenting is about, is how to raise your children so they don't forget. Because the first thing we do when people are born is we make sure they have all their fingers and toes, and, they've got my eyes or your nose or Aunt Mary's, chin. But nobody says, I know this is confusing to be in this body, but if you just stick with it, you're going to have it under control. And we welcome you. We welcome you with us. And we're going to help you get used to this body, and we're going to help you live this life in a way that you've planned to live it once you've gotten here. Nobody does that for their children. They all focus on the physical, so right away, child is being taught the physical is what's the most important thing.
And it's no wonder that child is like, oh my gosh, what did I come into and what's going on?
Yep. What have I done?
What have I done, and how did I end up here? Oh my gosh. Of course it's very confusing, and of course I'm sure, we do. Like you say, look at the physical, the mother's worn out and exhausted, and the father's trying to be wherever or do whatever. It definitely is.
It's just that's the moment you begin talking to their spirit and working with their spirit self and helping to mesh the physical and the spirit in a good and positive way, so that when you're 30 and you've been on Prozac for 15 years because you're such a strong empath that you can hardly get through the day because you're taking on so many people's feelings, if you had learned to deal with that as a young child, all of that would have been avoided.
It's so true, and I think that, too, you're alluding to a lot of things that I think eventually is going to lead us to rethink how we're learning, how we're teaching our children throughout the different stages of life and growing up. And you actually have in your book that you've written, Soulful Parenting, you actually have in there some aspects about ages where they have different where up to a certain age they've got and then they're drawing in the information from the family, and then at a certain age they start drawing it in from others. Do you want to share a little more about that?
Yeah, I try to mesh developmental stages with spiritual things, but developmentally, which I realize a child has learned 75% of what they're going to learn in their entire life by their 3rd birthday. And by the time a child is 5, they've figured out how the world works and where they fit in it. Not in a way that reflects any wisdom or maturity, but what works. So if you're in a family that's very inconsistent and unpredictable, by the time you're 5, you learn that, well, if I lie and sneak, I don't get in trouble. So that's practical for me, so that's what I think the world is about. Or if you live in a family that's predictable and stable, you learn, well, with what people say, that's what it is, and so I can trust people. By the time you're 8, you've pretty much figured out your conscience kinds of things, what's wrong, what's your morality going to be about. And if you think about most everybody remembers this for themselves. By the time you're 11, you've heard everything your parents are going to have to say to you. And that's why so many teens just don't want to listen to their parents, because they've heard it. And their parents say, oh, but you're not listening to me. But they say, but I have. And so then they just want to see what else is out there. And that's why after-school programs are very important, because sometimes they go to places and sources that are not very helpful for that outside information. So that's in a nutshell how it all works. But what's interesting to me is that developmentally, the brain is not capable of seeing something from another person's point of view until they're in their teens. But recently, I've been working with a little girl who's she's just so in tune. She's a year old. There was a baby with her that was crying, and she went and got a toy and brought it to the baby. Never said a word. And that is very unusual for somebody that's a year old. And that was her empathic self, her spiritual self working.
And I think that's it. You know, we talk of a child, and that's what those early years where we're so open and so receptive and so tuned in, and we do. You know, at that age, nobody is do that, and nobody has, you know, the restrictions on us really at that point. We're just operating by complete natural flow of energy through us.
Right.
And we
right.
we instinctively know. You know, as you say, there's a telepathic communication that goes on that seems to get suppressed, you know, as we grow up.
Yes. Another thing is, I was holding a 9-month-old in my lap, and all of a sudden she just turned around to the person next to her and looked at her very intently and took both of her hands and put them on the woman's chest. And the woman looked at me and she says, what's she doing? I said, well, what does it feel like? And she said, well, it's very warm and it's very tingly. I said, she's giving you a healing. I said, what do you have wrong? And she said, well, I have congestive heart failure. And I said, well, she doesn't have those words, but she knew something was wrong and she knew what to do to fix it. And she was 9 months old. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, don't touch her there. That's not nice. And that would have been her first message about healing. Don't do it. It's not nice. So if you can look at children's actions through these eyes, you can help their abilities, you know, stay with them. But if you look at what they do through society's eyes, it comes out a whole different way.
And that is something that a lot of people are not thinking about because they haven't been trained to realize the bigger picture. I think, you know, even as adults, they're not trained to see these bigger patterns a lot of times. Things, and so the reaction is, don't do this. And it's amazing if we think back, you know, how many times did we do that, and what we were actually doing was cutting off somebody's vision or cutting off their healing abilities or things like this that were naturally flowing out of them. But we just couldn't see that.
And then when they become adults, then they want to find out about it and relearn everything.
Right. Then they have to reawaken, and they have to go back and go, that looks kind of interesting. And I feel like a really important thing through the indigos, and we're dealing with crystals and soon to be the rainbows. I mean, the rainbows and the crystals are supposed to be healers. So I think for people out there, we need to be careful to start thinking about making some of these readjustments and relearning as adults.
But I think they need to think about it through a different paradigm, because when the term indigo came out, it only meant that children or people, actually anybody, with a spiritual connection had the color indigo in their aura rather predominantly, which makes sense because indigo is the color of the third eye, that chakra, that energy center. And yet people took it and made it into some kind of like a DSM model with a whole list of personality traits that really have to do with, very strong-willed, free-spirited people. Very few of the traits are anything about being intuitive. Mm-hmm. I call intuition the language of the soul, because that's where I think it comes from. And so it became an academic kind of definition. And when you're dealing with spirit work, as you know, you can't try. You have to allow. You can't prove, because you have to take it on faith. And it's just, you can't analyze. You just have to pay attention. So it's a whole different paradigm than what people are taught in their 13 years of going to school. And that makes it hard for people also to grasp that you have to look at things through a different paradigm.
Yes, definitely. And it is, because we get so set in our school systems that this is how you learn and this is how you have to do it. And it's not necessarily in that conducive realm. The soul is kind of going, yeah, but this isn't normal. This isn't how I learn. And you're trying to force me to learn a way that doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe you can share with us a little bit, Susan, about some of the way that children learn, like, for example, when they're with your school or things like that. Because it really is a different style. You say it's about, just as the story you gave with the 9-month-old baby, and you ask the adults, what do you feel like? I think
what we do is we give people experiences that they can participate in so that they can find their own way that they relate to the spirit world. Everybody is unique. Even though we've done nothing different from anybody else, our particular collection of experiences makes us unique. So our interaction with spirit is going to be also unique. In spirit work, it's not like 2 + 2 is always 4. In spirit work, it may be, okay, I get a message because I see something. I get a message because I see a color. I get a message because I hear something. I get a message because I smell blueberries. It's so dozens of ways that you can get your information. So we create experiences in a very safe environment, which is why we never have more than 5 or 6 people at a time, because that's all I can take care of at once, so that nobody wanders off somewhere in the energetic world and gets lost. I can, take care of 6 people and them find their own way of relating. And some things come easily and some things don't. And one of the beautiful things about it is you can't fail. You just keep trying till you find your way, because there's no one right way. to find things. One of the things that we do that's a very simple game is to have multiple sets of stones. So like if you and I were playing this game, we would have at least 3 stones. I would have 3 and you would have the same 3. And I would hold one of those stones in my closed fist. And you would have to see what it is by reading the energy of the stone, not by using any physical senses. So that teaches you when you second guess. It teaches you how you feel when you're in the right place and you really know it. It teaches you, well, what way do I use to know it? Do I go inside the hand and look? Do I put my hand on the hand and feel the energy? Do I listen to the stone sing to me? What do I do? So it's many different ways. So we don't follow a curriculum as such and you get a certificate at the end. It's just at the end you're much wiser about your own self. And all that, the things that you listed about the sanctuary and the trust and the confidence, those are things that students have told me that they have gotten out of being here that were things I never even thought about them getting out of being here.
Well, and it is an interesting, when you set up an environment that removes that sense of possible failure in it, you've created a space of safety, which is completely open. You're going to naturally have confidence. And like you say, these types of activities that you do, looking at something and saying, well, what does that feel like? Or holding something and saying, what does that becomes a different way of relating that, one, I think is much more compatible, we say, with the soul and the way it functions and works, and 2, with the act of tuning in, like a street smart in addition to just a knowledge base, because then wherever you are, you've learned to tune in and say, am I feeling safe here? What is the vibration? What is the feeling? And whether you need to stay there or get out of there, and these are a lot of things that people are not told, but along the way.
Right. And you learn to trust what you get. You don't have to try to, well, let me wait and see if this is right, and then, something horrible happens. You trust it, and you don't worry about it. You don't need proof because you've had so many experiences trusting this. You know what it feels like when you're on, so to speak, and so you just trust it. And it takes a great burden off of people. Because I tell people, I say, whenever you say, I don't know what to do, I said, you're leaving out your soul. Your soul, your spirit knows what to do. So you just make yourself and just I don't know what to do, of course. The brain doesn't know what to do because the brain only has in it what's been put in it. Spirit knows everything. Now, the brain's very helpful in putting together the knowledge that you get from spirit and making good choices with it. But the brain all by itself, with the data that's been put into it, can't know everything. And quite often knows very little. As one of my students put it, my brain's trying to figure this out, but it doesn't have the information. And I told her I was going to borrow that. So she's listening. I'm sure she's chuckling right now.
Well, and it's true. It's really that, that app set up to function like a computer, whereas the soul is not that kind of programmable thing. More of an independent, experiential-based aspect, and
the soul is who we are. That's who we are.
it's interesting to me. I mean, I just am kind of sitting here and playing and entertaining with the idea of, what if we couldn't fail at anything? What if instead of the world being set up on right, wrong, success or failure, what if there was no failure? What if it just simply was? And whatever you did was, the thing to do. I mean, it's that idea, and I think of how it could be under that concept of you can't fail. It's an interesting, entertaining thing for me to look at. Let me ask you, how can you tell someone is intuitive? Is this just everybody is intuitive, or how can you tell that they're ready to use?
Well, everybody has a soul, right? So everybody's soul speaks. It's really a matter of how much someone pays attention to it. And some people, just like some people can draw better, or some people can fix cars better, or if I was to go try and figure out how to do electrical wiring, I would really have to study hard, and it would be difficult for me. I suppose I could do it without burning the house down or electrocuting myself, but it would just take a lot of time. But other things I'm really good at, and just some people are really good at paying attention to the information that they get. Who knows why we have what different talents? I mean, that opens up a whole nother past life thing that is a whole nother show. But so I believe everybody is intuitive, but not everybody pays attention to it. Mm-hmm. I had one man call me, and he says, I have no abilities. I have absolutely no abilities. And we talked, and all of a sudden he interrupted me. He said, "Oh, you mean when I hear my grandfather coming down the hall with his walker, who passed 20 years ago, that's being intuitive?" I said, "Yes." So a lot of people don't know, because they've done it all their life, and they're looking for some kind of Hollywood dead zone, da-da-da-da, and everything shakes and it's big dramatic. It's so natural. It's so natural and subtle, and people have done it all their lives, so they don't think it's anything special. And it's not anything special. Here at the center, I have a big jar. Instead of a square jar, it's amazing. There's a quarter. It's not amazing. It's what we are. It's freaky. It's not freaky. It's natural. It's what we are. Quarter, please. I don't know how this happened. You do know how this happened. You connected with spirit. Quarter in the jar. Because I'm trying so hard to get people to just see it like breathing, instead of something separate from themselves and alien to their lives. It's just who we are and how we connect with things if we allow it.
Which is,
I think that's my message of the night.
It's important to keep in mind that really this is a natural aspect of who we are, and we really don't have to force it. I think society is programmed in, you have to learn, you have to force it, you have to, especially born through a lineage. And I keep telling people, well, somebody's going to be the first to bring it out and actively work with it. Yes, so I definitely am with you on that. I think that everybody is. It's just not everybody's aware of it or chooses to work with it. What do you most commonly notice, Susan, when people are just starting out on their path? Is there something that they most need to learn with this?
There's three things. There's three tools that I think are very important, and it's interesting with the name of your show. One of the things is to walk in love and compassion, to walk with that energy always around you. I know a lot of people talk about shields and they talk about bubbles and they talk about white light. But if you walk, if you're protecting yourself, then you're operating in that traditional Western paradigm of attack and defend. So if you feel like you need to defend yourself, you're going to attract things that are attacked. But if you walk in love and compassion, only things that resonate with love and compassion are comfortable around you. You're not harming anything, but it's just not comfortable to be around you if you're full of genuine spiritual. When I work with teens, I really have to emphasize spiritual. They say, ooh, romance. I said, no, it's spiritual. But that spiritual love and compassion and just push it out. And I had people, when I really pushed it out to them, and they'll say, oh, that doesn't feel nice. That feels uncomfortable because they've never been around it. And they don't know what it feels like. And these are adults. Children just kind of, soak it all up. But adults, because they're not used to it, they're always used to people putting them down, or they're used to people making them feel small and all of this kind of nonsense, and they don't know what it feels like. So how can they push it out? So that's one thing. The first thing I teach anybody is how to ground. Because when you're grounded, you can stay in control. When you're grounded, if you get information from the energetic world, you can handle it better because you're anchored. I mean, you're in a physical body, and your physical body needs to be connected to the earth. And the other thing is paying attention. A lot of people just don't pay attention. So those are the three things that I teach first to people. And it takes a long time before that becomes part of their lifestyle. But we keep working at it. Because we don't just talk about things, we do. We do.
And they definitely are really important things, and that is something I've told people, if you just get yourself into the space of love and compassion, as you say, there's no need for all this other stuff. And I know with ground, it's so very important, and I know there's some controversy starting to come up about grounding. Well, we're evolving. We're supposed to be grounding down into the earthly plane things. And for me, I think of, in some senses, you're still in a human body, as you say, so there has to be a certain amount of grounding. But when I ground, actually energy or that soul aspect flow more freely and more easily when I'm grounded.
Yes. You remember more. If you travel, it's easier to remember where you've been. If you are around other people that are not walking with good energy, you can just push it right into the ground because you're connected, and you can, if it comes in you can just easily push it out without pushing it back into the, back on other people. It's just a huge, important tool.
Now, you have something. Well, let me proceed with where we're at now. So, how are spiritual abilities developed? I know you've given a little bit of an example of having this and this environment of not being able to fail, but how does somebody really develop their spiritual abilities? They say, look, I've done without long enough to wake this up, or I've got, and they obviously have spiritual ability. How do I help them develop that?
It's like going to Carnegie Hall. Practice, practice, practice. It's really, and we practice by paying attention. So if you get a feeling or, okay, let's suppose you get a thought that just comes into your head. It's not something you're thinking about. That's spirit talking. So you have to pay attention to it, which I'd like to go on a little side trip with that, if I may.
Be my guest.
Because sometimes, yes, okay, because sometimes we don't do a good job of teaching people about death in Western society. But just because the body dies does not mean somebody's personality changes. So if you've got some jerk who spent his entire or her entire life conning people and manipulating people and getting over on people, just because the body dies, they don't change. In fact, they probably don't even cross over. But what they do is they will find people who are sensitive, who don't understand that they are sensitive, and they'll run the same game on them. And those people end up being called paranoid schizophrenics because they've got all these voices coming in their head telling them to do things. But in my opinion, they're really just people with mediumship abilities, but absolutely no understanding or skills or knowledge about how to deal with it. And they find themselves in terrible situations because of it. So all voices that we get don't come from good places unless we're walking in that love and compassion. Because what I call spirit bullies, they don't want to be around love and compassion. They want to be just like a bully in school. They pick people who aren't going to stick up for themselves.
Right.
And just because they pass doesn't mean they're going to suddenly pick strong people. They're going to still pick up on people that can't stick up for themselves and are easy to manipulate.
That's a really, really interesting concept, that concept. And I have to wonder, by the time we have them diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, if that child had just been able to, for example, go to a school like yours and use their gifts, as I'm with you, I think so many times, maybe not in every case, but so many times it's gifts coming in for somebody who's for them or hasn't been trained to use them or these sorts of things. And I just think, man, if somebody had taken that person as a child and then these other opportunities, differently have turned out.
The same with bipolar. I really feel bipolar people are very strong but out of control, empathic people. And that's why they have these enormous mood swings, because they suck up everything that's around them without realizing it. Yes. I know there's mental illness. I know there's physical and emotional trauma that makes our brains see the world in unhelpful ways or shuts us down so we don't have to see the world at all, and I understand that. But I also think a majority of what is called mental illness is people with gifts that are not controlled. Because I have seen people who have been on Prozac for 15 years get off, open their own business, and deal with people all day long and be a stable, productive person with no mood swings.
I have somebody from our chat room, Susan, that's saying, my daughter is this way. We were working with Spirit now. She has had the first really good year, and it has made a difference for her to do that. And they pray the rosary, and her hands would get hot. She says that when they put the rosary in her daughter's hands, her hands would get hot. That was a key of her moving energy. So, yeah, and I think parents just have been trained to identify these things. And like you say, I do believe this too. I see so many people that people have given up on. It's like they're just really, really challenged. with what's happening for them. Now, what about people who are, and this kind of leads into my next thought here, what about people that are afraid of disability? How do you deal with that?
What about people who are
afraid of using their abilities, the abilities that they have?
Well, yes. They're afraid because they don't understand. They're afraid because society teaches us to be afraid. Long ago, there was a woman that walked into a psychiatric institution to talk to them about the paranormal. She never left. They locked her up. She died in there.
Mm.
Those kinds of things make people afraid to talk about it because there's still people. I mean, I look at a lot of things on Yahoo to try to answer questions that people have about these topics, and to look at some of the things that people say and how rude they are and how much they make fun of them, or how much they tell them you're evil, you're the devil, you're, this is horrible, you need to be exorcised or something. And when they hear these things, that gets you confused. Sometimes people see, I don't know, did you see the movie The Sixth Sense?
I believe I
boy.
did. But yes.
Well, at the end, they show him, and there's this poor little girl, and she's all bloody and messed up. But that was because that's the way she looked when she passed. And sometimes people don't know they can, when they're in spirit, they don't know they can change how they look. And they come to you looking like that, and that's frightening for some people. But all you have to do is say, change how you look. It's hard looking at you looking like this. Look like you used to look. Or sometimes they get really excited because somebody finally sees them, and they get like 2 inches from your face. And that's kind of startling for people. But all you have to do is say, back up. You don't need to get so close. They're people. They're still people. They're still entities, and you can speak to them just like you would a physical person and interact with them the same way. When I people about being afraid, if they have any kind of a belief system, I asked them, I said, how can you be afraid if you believe in God or Allah or whatever it is you believe in? Don't you believe that you're going to be safe because that protects you?
Right. And go ahead.
So it's just a confluence of things, I think, that make people afraid, but I think the biggest thing is that they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a girl once that used to sleep in her bathtub with a flashlight on, but she was so afraid.
Wow.
And I would sit with her, and somebody came, and she was like, oh no. I said, I tell you what, let's build this staircase right here. I said, tell him if he wants to go home, he can go up. And he went up the staircase, and at the top he waved to her and then went on. She said, that's all it is? I said, that's all it is. She said, how foolish I am. She was like 15 or 16. Why was I afraid of that when that's all they wanted? It's just a lack of understanding and a lack of tools of knowing what to do.
Right.
That's all it is, I think.
And a lack of people around her knowing what to do. And the person in the chat room said, that was for their daughter, who's now getting better, was that they would end up institutionalized. And like I think that thanks to Hollywood, other stories out there, that people do have that.
Yeah,
that if I speak out, that somebody's going to lock me in.
And it really doesn't matter if the parent can't do these things. My younger son can do many things that I couldn't do because he was never taught to forgive. And so when he would have his spirit friends, I would just say, well, tell me about them. And he would describe them and talk about them, and I talked to them through him, and, so it was all fine. You don't have to be able to do these things to listen and support.
That's a really good point, I think, to keep in mind, is that if you are around somebody, be it your own child or somebody else with these gifts, asking them to tell you about what's happening, tell you what they see, tell you what's going on, can be a great supportive way to, help them feel comfortable with what's happening, help them open up and learn what to do. And in making that door open, I think what we really do then is to say, well, now we can take a look at it, start to understand it better. Hearing it, we might know how to deal with it.
When my son was 4, he came to me. He had been playing in the back of the house, and he came up to me. He said, I just finished talking to the nicest man. And I said, oh, do you know who he is? He said, no. But I really liked him. He said to tell you, he said to me to tell you that he's sorry he never said goodbye. And I said, you sure you don't know who he is? He said, no, but I know where there's a picture of him. So he took me back, and he showed me a picture of my dad. Now, my dad had died when I was 13, and he had gone into a coma, and I never really got to tell him goodbye. Now, when my son came to me and told me he had been talking to the nicest man, and I had said, what do you mean, a man? There's no man in here. How do you know that? Why are you saying this? Well, I would have missed a message from my father.
Wow.
But that's usually how children are met. That's the language they're met with when they say it. How do you know that? Well, I just do. I saw him. Well, I don't see him, so how can he be there? And then the child, because you're the all-knowing adult, goes, well, okay, maybe I'm making this up.
Right. And so that's another one of those, like what you were mentioning earlier, we have to be careful about, I don't see that, so it can't be there sort of thing happening. We have to be cautious of some of those statements in things along the way. And I know that I had that ability to see from a very, very young age. And, I was always curious, about them and why they would always show up and things like that. It's really a different approach, and I think this really touches on some of the things of how to work with a child that has spiritual is going into these descriptions. Are there other things besides asking them about it that parents need to be thinking about?
Just like when my grandchildren used to come to visit, I would ask them, well, have you seen any spirit people or had any dreams? And one of them, the younger one, said, no, but I had a vision. Let me tell you about it. She was 4. She was 4 at the time. She knew it wasn't a dream, and she knew it wasn't, but it was a vision that she had while she was awake, which many daydreams, what we call daydreams, are vision. So we make these cute little terms for them so that we explain them away. So it was, you can just ask, just like, how was your day? Well, my son and I started talking about his dreams early on. He was 6 months old. We were talking about his dreams. And even today, as a man with 2 children of his own, he'll still occasionally call me, Mom, let me tell you about this dream. That's very precious to me, that he would want to still share those.
Right. It really is. I think that is that's got to be an exciting place to be as a parent, that they want to continue to share with you. And as you say, there's so much that you could miss out on, and from various researching and different things that I've done along the way, that spirits and angels and always around us. We just don't always choose to see them, as
right.
you said. And so who are we to say that they're not there? I mean, it's kind of like two people looking at a I don't know, a shirt or something, and one person is saying, well, that's blue, and the other person is saying purple, or that's green, or red, or something else. You're just seeing it differently. And, and that's, again, that kind of comes back to what you'd mentioned earlier, that there's not really this right or wrong or fail aspect. It's just, what are you seeing? What are you, and that's an important piece, I think. Susan, I know one of the things that you mentioned, that it's important to keep a physical space clean when you're intuitive. Why would that be?
Why is it important to keep it clean?
Yeah, why is that?
Energetically clean. Yeah, it's energetically clean. It's important to keep your space clean because it just makes it, you don't have to be bothered with bad energy. You can smudge, you can put out water, the bubbles that accumulate in water, although people don't agree with this. But I believe firmly that it attracts negative energy and traps it. So you don't want to drink that water. I worked with a woman once that lived near Las Vegas, and I told her about this. So she put a glass of water in every room in her house, and every single one of them got packed with bubbles except her meditation room. And
interesting.
So if it had been something about air pressure or something like that, it would have been in every room.
Right.
And I've seen it, you have a glass of water and it just get bubbles on one side because a person sitting on that side that had been sitting on that side left stuff and the other person didn't. I will often put out water on the table after people leave. If that stuff is in there, I mean, like a lot of people when they go to the mall, they get exhausted. And they come back and they're just drained. And it's because that's not a clean space. You've got all the energy of all the people who've ever walked through there. And people walk through there after they've been harmed, after they've had fights, after they've been sad. And all that energy is just wandering around in there for anybody to pick up. And if you're sensitive, you pick it up. And if people sense you have good energy, they want to be around you. And if you're letting them use your personal life force energy, yes, you will be drained. If you are walking in a place of love and compassion that's being drawn from the source, they can't drain that.
Right.
It's like people who do healing. People do healing and they're really tired after they've done the healing. It's because they're using their own energy, which isn't good.
Right. That's a
On
really
the other
important...
hand, I've known Reiki people that have like swept the energy out the door. And one of our clients did it, and after 2 years, a tree outside her window died because she really didn't understand what she was doing.
Mhm. I've seen some of that too with people, and you mentioned the water, so let's go back to that for a second too. When we're talking about this negative energy, and you put the water out, so let's say somebody does that, and they have a whole bunch of bubbles in the water. What do they do with the water?
Yeah. And you pour it down the drain, you're sharing it with everybody else. So you scatter it on the earth. You scatter it because that's what she does. That's what mothers do. They take bad things and make them into good things.
So if you take it and you put it on the earth and then it won't...
Scatter it, though. If you keep pouring it in the same place, you'll kill everything that's there.
So
I had some people that didn't believe me, so they did it, and all the grass died in that space where they kept pouring it.
Okay. And so
it's another reason. But that's on our website. That's on our FAQ page on our website. Those things about how to keep your space clean.
Yeah, it should go to the earth, scattered around, but not necessarily down the drain.
No, because then you're just putting it back for everybody else to drink.
Everybody else to drink. And the earth can take it and heal it as long as it's not constantly get bought. So these are little things that a lot of people don't know, which is why I ask them, because there's a lot of people that aren't familiar.
Why would they know?
Yeah.
Why would they know? The indigenous people know about these things because they live with the earth. But Westerners people that follow Western society have separated themselves so far from the earth that I saw this letter someone had written about, well, she doesn't understand why everybody gets so upset about killing animals. Why don't they go to the grocery store where no animals are harmed? And that's how separated she is from what's real.
Right.
And the Internet is creating a whole world that's separate from what's real.
Mhm. It does, that whole virtual world, and people, they don't realize that if they go out and do that in the actual world versus on the computer, that there's consequences.
Somebody will punch him in the nose.
Exactly. It really is. It's amazing. Made, as you say, those separations. I mean, I come from a lot of families that were farming families, and so, there wasn't that separation. You saw everything, birth on the farm, death on the farm, you saw.
You knew what was real, but a lot of people don't anymore.
Yeah, you knew where your food was coming from and what it took to put it on the table and all the different forms to get it there, pretty much. Yeah, I think that those are good points, and I think that, again, just things that the average person is not thinking about when they're doing things. Now, one of the things that you do there is spiritual healing. And why would someone need spiritual healing?
Because sometimes we accumulate so much energy in ourselves, particularly people who've been traumatized as children, and all that energy is stuck in them and they can't get rid of it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So you help their spirit by getting the energy out. You're not doing anything physically to them. You're just working on their spirit. And you can remove that energy. And I had one man at the end of the session once. He just opened one eye and he said, "Do I have to come back?" I said, "Oh, yes, you do. You do have to come back." He said, "But I feel so nice. I feel so good right now. I feel so light and clean. I don't want to go back out there." I said, "Well, you don't have to bring it back. You don't have to put it back in you." It's just like what you were saying about the water in the beginning, how we polluted the water in our bodies, but we've also polluted the spirit with all of this negativity that, I mean, Western society is based a great deal on fear.
Yes,
fear of failure, fear of going to hell, fear of people not liking you, fear of not getting the job. For most people, the school experience is about avoiding failure. It's not about learning. It's about avoiding failure. It's about trying to fit in. So there's just a lot of stuff that's in us that doesn't belong there. The thing about the fitting in, I have a story for when I had my pre-K through grade 12 school, I had this little girl standing in front of me who had gotten in trouble, and she was, weeping like crazy. And one of the other children had been there longer, and he went up behind her and he said, "That doesn't do any good here." She stopped crying on a dime. She turned around to him and she said, "Well, what am I supposed to do then?" And he said, "You have to tell her the truth and just be who you are." And then he wandered off. I said, oh, yes, this is exactly what this place is about. And she looked at me. She said, "Well, I really did it, but you're not mad at me." I said, "No, I'm not mad at you. You just have to say you did it, and we'll figure it out so it won't happen again, because you made people unhappy. We don't want people going around making other people unhappy here."
Yeah.
And the culture of the school was such that once we had this very plain child. She was the kind of child everybody would bully. And we had a new boy who was going to bully her, and he said something very unkind to her about her looks. And she looked at him, and she crossed her arms. She said, "Well, now you have to tell me 2 nice things since you said something mean to me." And the look on his face was priceless. And he looked at the other children, and they said, "Yep, that's what you got to do. Either that or go talk to Susan." So he told her 2 nice things, and he was very astonished. But you see, we in that way, we helped everybody walk in love and compassion.
Wow. I love it. I wish we could do that, like in the adult world, in the workplace. You weren't nice. Now you've got to tell me.
You can. It depends on how the boss. All that comes from whoever the boss is. How everybody treats each other all comes from the boss.
It comes to our individual selves. Are we willing to hold that standard and say, "No, you got to do this. Now I want you to focus on something positive."
But it's very nice when you have a place where people don't have to protect themselves and defend themselves all the time and can just be. And again, this goes to that spiritual healing. When I would have teenagers come to our school for the first time, they would sleep for 3 days, every last one of them. And it is because they were so exhausted from having to be on guard in school all day long. And when they got there, they didn't, and they would just collapse. And we let them because we understood what was going on. We had couches; they weren't in anybody's way, and everybody knew. Oh, there's another new one, huh? It was, this is standard protocol. But and then they were all ready to go. But see, they're not allowed to be like that in other places. You have to do what people want you to do instead of following what you naturally do.
Well, and it's so true. We exert a tremendous amount of energy trying to protect ourselves and be on this defensive. And
yes,
it's been so programmed that that's what we have to do. And then we wonder why we don't. We wonder why our energy is depleted. We wonder why we're not feeling peace in our life. And like you say, this living on fear leads us to these spaces of feeling like we have to defend ourselves. If we're living in fear, we're going to feel like we have to defend ourselves.
Yeah. And so what was one of the things people said they found at our center was sanctuary, because they don't have to be anything but who they are here.
And that's exactly why it would be important to have a school like yours, is because people don't have to be anything other than what they are. They don't have to be in that space. And I just find that if we could, I'm hoping with your message here tonight that's going to definitely help some people rethink about some things in their life, to realize, oh, man, I must be living in fear because I'm on the defensive. To kind of give this wake-up call that I don't have to take these, that I need to honor these things. I need to respect what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling. And as you were talking about some of those things, I was also thinking, how many times as an adult, even after we get out of all of our childhood stuff, and a lot of what you're talking about is things that we should be doing amongst adults too, and not just children.
Oh, absolutely.
But how many times do we sit there and go, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid of losing my house, or I'm so afraid of losing my relationship, instead of stopping and tuning in and saying, how do I feel about being in this space? Or how do I feel about being with this person? And I bet,
or just saying, I know I'm going to be taken care of. I don't know how, but I've been promised that I'm going to be taken care of.
And I think that aspect of coming to that realization, but tuning in and saying, how do we really feel? And if we're truly honest with ourselves, we might find that maybe we're not comfortable in that space, or maybe there's something in that relationship that is making us uncomfortable, or that work environment, or wherever it is, and that leads us to create, instead of just tuning into that feeling and saying, hey, maybe I need to go find someplace else to live or something, it ends up creating these negative circumstances to come into our life because we're not paying attention. And that's,
paying attention is very important.
Yeah.
Those three things are equally important. I don't teach them all. I teach grounding, loving compassion, and then paying attention. But they are all equally important.
I wholeheartedly agree. They're a powerful trinity. Maybe they are the trinity.
Because when you're truly grounded, when you are truly grounded and you breathe in and you're paying attention to when you breathe in, you can feel the energy come up through your feet from the earth. How you know you're really grounded. And it's such a good and peaceful feeling. And there's nothing that can take that away from you. Nothing. That's always there for you. I don't care where you are or how horrible the place is. That's always there for you.
Absolutely. And I think that we forget that a lot of times. When we're not paying attention, we forget that is constantly
if we
accessible.
ever knew.
If you ever knew, right. If anybody allowed you to pay attention to it in the first place.
Yeah.
Susan, I would love now a couple of things. You've got two books out, Soulful Parenting and Psychic Children, and you did most of the work in Soulful Parenting, and then Peggy Day, who co-authored these with you, did most of the work in Psychic Children.
Right.
I know that your book, too, has a lot of the Edgar Cayce principles in it, so maybe you could just share with us a little bit about what people might find in those books and why bringing in the Edgar Cayce principles.
In the Psychic Children book, it's an overview of the literature and what was going on back in, I think that was written in 2004, and what was going on then, what people were saying, and also what the Cayce readings had to say about, because Cayce predicted that people would notice these children in the coming years, and gave thoughts about how to deal with children who were very sensitive and how to keep their energy flowing in their body. So there's a lot of practical advice in that book, too. And it also talks about programs in China and in other places that work with, in China, they go around at birth to find children that they know are gifted like that, and they take them and they raise them, and they end up working for the company, the government, which is rather astonishing. But and just other programs that work with gifted people. And the soulful parenting, it goes from conception to adolescence, what needs to be done at each of those stages with the children to help them to. But there are also stories from people who remember their childhood and stories of parents who have gifted children, which is very interesting, particularly one where the poor boy was on so much medication that he ended up getting Tourette's from the medication, and how he went off everything and went back to school and didn't need special ed, and that was just really a wonderful story that she told. And there's chapters on spiritual protection, on discipline, on universal laws, and on education, with people being gifted in mind. Edgar Cayce, I think if you were to say the three, just live it. And that's what Cayce was all about, is that if you have knowledge, you live it. In fact, in one of the readings it said the only sin is knowledge not lived. You need to be helpful to other people. You need to sit on your own bottom, so to speak, and not think other people are responsible for you being the way you are, but you're responsible for yourself. You are always meeting yourself. It's just very practical advice, I think, in how to live your life, to be patient, to be kind, to be forgiving, to be cooperative, especially cooperative with your soul. I mean, I could go on for days on this topic, but I'll stop there.
Well, and I think that's good, and you do bring in some aspects from Edgar Cayce's work on parenting, as you say, covering a variety of different areas and topics there that really help bring some understanding, I would say, to why those things are important and how they can affect us. And the stories as well, you know, in the book where Peggy accumulated so many of these stories and these different places that are doing things, I feel is so useful, because there's so many people out there that either experienced that when they were growing up, or have children that have gone through that, or you know, different things like that. And the stories is just what really brings it home for us. I know that when my niece was born, I was there at her birth, and people were, the whole hospital staff was really quite fascinated, because, you know, she would scream and scream and scream in this area. But anytime I walked up next to her, she would just be quiet and silent. And they would look at her and they would like, what is going on there? And you could tell the wheels were turning, but they weren't quite sure what was happening. And, you know, I would just kind of like put one little finger up by, you know, where they had her in. And she was just, you know, would look to that. The stories really do help us in what we're dealing with in our own lives. So very, very valuable and very, very useful there. Yeah, huge things. And Cayce's, like you say, they're just some really great foundations in there for what you've provided. And you've tied it together beautifully in your Soulful Parenting book. And again, I encourage people on this, because it's, you know, it's about how to embrace, engage, and encourage our children. And the principles you've mentioned there, again, are quite useful even in working with adults or anybody out there.
Yep.
as well as children. So I've got a few minutes for you here, for you to share with us, how do people contact you? How do they find out more about what you're doing, and any other little plugs you'd like to give for yourself?
Yeah, well, everything is on our website. We had people. I even had somebody come here from Italy. I was so honored. But we have people come and spend like a day, or some people come and spend the whole week with us to study and learn. They'll come as a family, or they'll come with a friend, or they'll come alone. We do Skype sessions and phone sessions. The core of our work is our Living in Your Heart class that meets. We have 4 of those that meet every week, where people just get led from. This is when they take this time to get to know how they interact and how they. And I have one girl who started when she was 11, and now she's 14, and she's such a different person than she was. And she's so wise and calm now, whereas before she was very sensitive and everything made her cry. And she was easily bullied at school, and now nobody bothers her. And it's just wonderful watching her grow up. And so there's a variety of ways. One easy way is we have a Facebook page, A Place of Light, and I post an exercise of the week every week. For people to work on, that promotes a way of life that helps you pay attention better. Just little things to do. Like if you can go a whole day without saying an unkind word, thought, or deed, that brings a better positive energy for you. If you spend your whole day criticizing and complaining, then you're not walking in love and compassion. You're walking in negativity. And what resonates with negativity is more negativity. So then you really need a spiritual healing to get rid of all that stuff you're carrying around with you.
Definitely.
And those, the healings too.
I think that that's so great, and definitely checking that out on Facebook. I know I want to connect there if I haven't already. I'm trying to think if I already connected or not.
I think you are. But if somebody gets on that page, they need to put it on their interest list or whatever it is on there, because Facebook only sends it out to 10% of the people who like the page. But if you put it on your interest list, then you get all the posts.
Right.
That's important for anybody with a Facebook page to know. Another thing is, like, I spent 2 days in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago because a woman got together some people that wanted to learn, and so I went down and taught them there. So if you can't get to Massachusetts, but you can get people together who could get me there, we could charge enough that will get me there. I'd be happy to go visit people as well, small groups.
I think that's wonderful that they've got all of those different options from you, from working online to going there and working directly through the different things you're offering, or even being able to bring you to where they are. And I know that can be very, very useful, especially for somebody who's maybe on a time crunch or something that they might not be able to take all the time to go see you, but if they could have you come out for a weekend or something and work with them and their family, that's really a great thing for them to know about in dealing with it. And so, I definitely encourage people to check out your website. And again, the link for that is at the bottom of our show description, www.placeoflight.net. And also, if you go in there and you go to the Connect With Us page, Susan has, the information on there of how to connect with her, different things that are going on, radio shows that are going on, Facebook connections, all of these different things. So you can definitely check it out and see the information that's on there, as well as her FAQ section and articles and stories and all kinds of things. So she really has quite a bit on there for everybody to indulge in.
Yeah, the full story of that little 3-year-old is on our articles and stories page.
Perfect. Susan, it has been such a pleasure to have you on, and I know it's been very late night for you, and I appreciate you taking the time, giving us the time tonight to share about what you're doing and to bring this component of compassion in, of us needing to rethink how we're dealing with people and how we're learning things ourselves, even as adults, and tuning into these processes. I know it's been very valuable information for our listeners.
Oh, it's been fun. I really have had a good time.
Wonderful. Definitely, it's been a pleasure, and we wish you much success, which I'm sure is already yours and already happening for you, and will continue to grow for you and everything. Thank you again so much.
Okay, thank you, Jessie.
And I just want to move on a little bit here and let everybody know what's coming up next week. We've got P.K. Odell coming on the show, and she's going to be discussing her work in feng shui and what we need to think about in relation to the year of the horse. We will be at the Chinese New Year next week when our show shows up, so it's very exciting to bring her in. She's worked on many levels, and I know you're going to absolutely love the work that she has to share with us. Again, my books on relationships have been released, and you can check out all of my work actually by going to JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com, and on the products tab for Jessie's products, you'll find all of the books listed there, links to both paperback and also ebooks. And you'll also notice there that there's another link that is for guest products. And so a lot of the guests that I've had on the show, I've put their products up, and I will be getting, I'll be seeing what I can do to get Susan's books up there as well on there. If you go through, and it's got like links to Stephen Halpern's music and Peter Cater's music, as well as books that the different guests have put out that I've had on the show. So if you're ever wondering, hey, that guest that you had on, where do I go and find that? You know, that's another resource for you as well on that. Again, I'm working on putting together compassion tour things and events that are going to be happening throughout this year. I'm going to be releasing actually about, I would say, around 7-8 events coming up, and they're events that are based around the cycles and the seasons and the planetary influences and all kinds of wonderful things culminated together. Information will be getting released on that in about a week, and you can follow that at JessieAnnNicholsGeorge.eventbrite.com. And definitely, again, I have a lot of videos out with little tips in it and monthly specials that come around, like this month. A lot of people I know have their own practices and businesses and things going on, and I'm offering advertising here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour where you can get 2 weeks for the price of one, and I can even help you put those ads together. It's great for individuals looking to get their products or their services out there, as well as companies. And, you know, it's, again, our main show is both live and has unlimited archive access. We're streaming live now in 3 areas, which, again, we have a live stream going on with Para Encounters Network, StreamFinder, TalkStream Live, and then we have podcasts at iTunes, TuneIn, as well as here on Blog Talk Radio and the YouTube version. So, you know, whatever your preference is, I've got it out there for you pretty much, however you like to tune into the show. So there's lots of things there, and you can just check all those cool little things out on my website, JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com. I've also got online courses that I do, and I have a couple coming up this upcoming week on an end of the moon cycle reverie, as well as a new moon cycle honoring. I do those, as well as some other courses that are available as a recorded course for you. And you can certainly check those out at learnitlive.com /invite/JessieAnnNicholsGeorge. There's, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 courses or something like that available to check out. And don't forget that we've got several shows here on Main Street Universe throughout the week. Sunday nights we have Darren Bouquet, who's a reader at Madame Laveau in New Orleans, doing spiritual insights. And he's really fun. He usually has a little topic, and then he'll do readings and things like that. So if you're looking for somebody good to do readings, he is available, and he does free readings on that show. Monday nights, Kevin Baird, Walking on the Sidewalk. He works with his Horizon Oracle Journeys deck, a deck that he created himself. You can check out that deck at templeofgaia.com. Tuesdays, Susan Weed. She's sharing her knowledge in herbs and natural plants. Wednesdays is our flagship show, which has Daniel and Janice and Brett on the flagship show. And matter of fact, they just interviewed me recently, so there's another one to catch in the archives on their show in regards to my relationship books, which was really interesting to do. And Thursdays, Queen Mother Amaku does work with Egyptian cultures. And, of course, Friday nights we have Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and that's the whole lineup here right now at Main Street Universe. This is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I really want to thank you so much for being here tonight with me and for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week as we delve more into Activating Compassion. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show this evening, make sure you get it shared with other people. It's going to be available at this same link in our archives, as well, like I said, on TuneIn and as well on iTunes and also on YouTube. So lots of choices for sharing it with people. And I'm going to leave you tonight with the song Yearning For, also known as Over and Over by Shemshai. I want to thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again next week right here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. May you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have an amazing week.
And if I could see what makes me blind, I would soar to the edge of my mind, and to touch what seems unreal, just to show you the way that I feel. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune, caught in a balance of sun and moon. Oh, deep inside, the light within, shining to show you it's here to begin. When all I have is all I need, I will soar to the edge of eternity. We see it eye to eye, one within love to be for the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in a balance of God and man. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower, whispering secrets, I bet you can't keep it. No turning back now, this time we reveal it. One to another, all will discover the essence within the most beautiful lover. Time is still turning, the love is still burning. Deep in your spirit, your heart is still yearning for. edge of my mind when all we have is all we need. All that we ask for shall be received. And we see in eye to eye, one within love to be for the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in the balance of God and man. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune of life in the circle and love in bloom. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower, whispering secrets, I bet you can't keep it. No turning back now, this time we reveal it. One to another, all will discover the essence within the most beautiful lover. Time is still turning, the love is still burning. Deep in your spirit, your heart is still yearning for. Over and over, life is your lover.